Not too long ago, I finally watched Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I went in knowing next to nothing about it, except that it was possibly Jim Carrey's least Jim Carrey role. I knew it was a beloved film, but I'd managed to avoid any spoilers, so I was basically going in blind. And since coming out of it, it's quickly become one of my favorite films. It's the kind that just stays in your mind, that you can't stop thinking about, and it manages to both break and warm my heart every time I think of it. So, with how complicated the emotions it elicits can be, it's no wonder it's been interpreted many different ways by the internet. I'm not here to offer a super in-depth analysis of every philosophical idea in the story, as I'm sure every part of this film has already been analyzed to death in the 20 years since its release. I just want to oversimplify the discussion surrounding it, and look at the three main messages I've seen people take away from the film. So before I get into it, just know that I'm just thinking out loud here, so if you like my brain vomit, you know where the like and subscribe buttons are. Now without any further ado, let's dive into this totally absurd, yet surprisingly grounded and relatable film, and see what makes this touching story of broken people and failed romance so uniquely poignant. Obviously, this video will be spoiling the film, but I'll try to keep things vague for those who decide to ignore this warning and may wish they hadn't afterward, because I really want you to enjoy the film, but I will need to talk about the ending, so you've been warned. Let me just briefly summarize the plot before I begin to analyze it. In the movie, Jim Carrey's character, Joel, has the memory of his failed relationship with Kate Winslet's character, Clementine, erased from his brain after he learns she's already done the same. Most of the movie is spent inside his brain as his memories are being erased, and he gradually comes to realize that he doesn't want to lose her. He decides that losing the pain of the lost years he spent isn't worth giving up the joy he had with her. However, in spite of his best efforts, the procedure is successful and he wakes up the next morning with no recollection of Clementine. However, as if drawn to each other, they meet again the next day and start dating all over again. The movie ends up after they learn about their past relationship and their decisions to erase their own memories. But instead of going their separate ways, they decide to give it another try. The movie seems to end on a largely optimistic note, leaving you uncertain yet hopeful about the couple's future. Nonetheless, there are different directions you can take the movie's themes, and some are certainly more optimistic than others. Let's start with a takeaway I surprisingly seem to see most often on the internet. I was initially taken aback when I found most people talking about this film describing Joel and Clementine's relationship as doomed. To many, this story is a bittersweet tragedy about our human inability to move on and escape harmful cycles. In many people's eyes, these two are just incompatible and destined to waste their lives repeating the same mistakes because they aren't willing to learn from them. It could be read almost as a cautionary tale, and this is certainly a valid take. After all, can't many of us relate to this story? We don't literally have our memories erased and end up in the same relationships we tried to forget all over again, but, well, sometimes we kinda do, don't we? When we, like Joel, are so desperate to ignore the pain of our past hurts that we just block out the memories as best we can, then we don't let ourselves learn from our experience, and we often find ourselves in similar situations all over again, repeating the same mistakes time and time again. I find this read on the film really insightful, but ultimately, it's a very dark take on a story that I feel like is meant to be far more inspiring. Of course, I don't think most people who interpret this romance as doomed necessarily see their future as entirely bleak. The movie is, after all, about the little joys of life, about the moments that make it worth living. I think many see the character's future as inevitable without seeing their choice to repeat it as a wholly bad thing. It's a choice to start something that probably won't last, but is nonetheless beautiful here and now, and is still worth enjoying before it fades. I mean, Joel and Clementine aren't ignorant about the struggles awaiting them. After hearing their past selves talk about each other, Clementine tells him she'll eventually get bored with him and he'll come to hate her because that's who they are. But Joel, who just sees the person he's known for the past few days, simply replies with what is possibly the most beautiful single-word line ever uttered in film. Okay. He's not naive about how this is going to go, but he loves the person he sees, and decides he wants to be with her as long as that's who she is. their doomed relationship could be a cautionary tale, but it could also be a beautiful message about living in the moment, about enjoying life while it's right in front of you, and not letting it pass you by because of what might come. Life is about change. Nothing earthly lasts forever, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't enjoy it while we can. I think there's certainly beauty to this take on the film, and this message has merit, but I still find it a bit cynical, and more than a bit hedonistic, so let's look at my favorite way to read this story's themes. The previous two takeaways are both perfectly valid, and this film would still be great if that was all it had to say. However, I think those interpretations take it for granted that people are either incompatible or not, and that they can't really learn or change. See, the reason I'm not entirely convinced that Joel and Clementine are destined to repeat their mistakes is because Joel, at least, is not the same person by the end of the movie that he was when he decided to have his memory wiped. He may have lost his memories of their relationship, but the lessons he learned over the course of the film appear to have remained with him. In his memories, we see a man who wasn't willing to change or communicate, a stubborn fault finder who didn't seem to put any work into fixing their relationship, and focused solely on his partner's weaknesses and mistakes. And ultimately, he was so bitter and angry over what happened that he elected to have her purged from his mind entirely, rather than deal with the pain. It's not until after he realizes what he's losing that we see a version of him more willing to be open and vulnerable, willing to take a chance and try to make it work, willing to take the full package, issues and all, because he sees the good in it, and it's worth the risk. Relationships aren't all sunshine and rainbows, though I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that. They're difficult and often painful, but they can be worth it if we're willing to make them work. No relationship is going to work out if both parties just expect it to work out on its own. It takes humility, openness, and a willingness to change. And of course, it takes an ability to see the good in people and find joy in all the highs and lows of life with them. These are things that Joel did not demonstrate before his journey, and things he very much shows in the movie's final scenes. This movie isn't just a cautionary tale or a hedonistic message about living in the moment, though it certainly could be those things. It's also a hopeful look at the messy and often broken beauty of love, of relationships, and of people. It's about finding joy in the chaos and struggles of life, about how the most meaningful parts come with both the bitter and the sweet, and you can't give up one without losing the other. I mean, look at Joel when we first meet him, waking up after having his memory wiped. He'd been so desperate to numb his pain that he ended up giving away a chunk of himself, and it left him hollow, aimless, a shell of the person his time with Clementine had made him. And where did that emptiness lead him? Right back to the one person who could fill that hole. Ultimately, my favorite message of the film might just be what it says about relationships, and how much we need them, how much the people we love become a part of us. Joel tried to wipe Clementine from his mind like cleaning a stain, but the process ended up cutting a piece out of his soul. It may seem like Joel is trying to save Clementine as they journey through his memories, but that's obviously not really her. It's just the part of his own mind that embodies her, and as she disappears, Joel loses a piece of himself. When Joel wakes up, he knows something's missing, something's not right, and he instinctually goes looking for it. See, the people we love become a part of us that we can't just erase. Even when we may part ways with them, they've still made us who we are. Our relationships shape us, and we can't move on without recognizing that. We can't expect to be able to pretend they never happened to us. And whether or not Joel and Clementine's second go-around is going to be any different from their first, that truth remains the same. So what is this movie trying to teach us? I think it can teach us many things. It tells us that healing from our heartbreak doesn't come from trying to erase the past and forget those who've hurt us. We have to accept the part of them they leave with us as a part of ourselves before we can truly move on. It also tells us that the struggles and hardships of life are inevitable, so rather than running from them, hiding from them, we might as well face them as we make the most of all the joys that come along the way. And finally, it teaches us that none of us are perfect. As Clementine said, we're all just a bunch of effed up people looking for our own peace of mind. And our relationships can never work as long as we expect those we love to be anything more than that. We have to be willing to accept them as they are, broken parts and all, to be open, to communicate, and to make it work. But if we're able to do that, if we're able to see them for the good in them, we can find joy with them. You can take these ideas in so many directions, but ultimately, I believe what the movie always comes down to is that the best things in life are never painless or easy, and true happiness only comes when we accept that and choose to seek joy and meaning over painlessness and ease. Thanks again for joining me. Please let me know in the comments what you take from this film. What makes it resonate with you? What do you think makes it such a timeless masterpiece? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments section. As always, this video is just meant to kick off the conversation, so please, never stay silent.